Eh bien, bonjour.
Good morning to one and all. For those of you who need an English translation, I suppose you can now hear me. Yes? First of all, I'd like to say hello to all those who follow this meeting on the other side of the world. We have 10 people to whom we say hello. So it's through a video conference that they can follow our discussions. I would like to say hello in French. We have a slight issue on the French channel. So since I'm going to speak French, I'll carry on in French. Well, the computer channel is okay in English. And French will be settled shortly. So for those of you who are listening to us in a far distant country, well, this is a great moment. Thank you for having come in great numbers, and thank you also for those who follow this through a video conference. We are around 60 in Paris or elsewhere. A great many nationalities have got together from Korea, here in Paris, Réunion, Spain, Croatia, Russia, and also a few French people. Italy. Enrico Polini will join us shortly, and Portugal, of course. I may have forgotten some countries, but Poland, Turkey. So we are an international gathering. Matthias, on the other side of the world. Hong Kong, United States of America. I don't know whether you have joined us because in the States you're in the midst of the night. Italy, Switzerland are connected, Canada, Australia, Poland, and Japan. Now, a few words as to the organization of this General Assembly. We shall try and to keep it short. We shall sum up all our activities since the very beginning, the very creation of ITRA. We shall try and cover this in 1 hour, and so we shall try and do this quickly. So we'll sum up all our activities since our creation. From 11 till 12 o'clock, we shall focus on a certain number of questions that were put to us, and this will also give us the opportunity for a 1 hour debate. We shall not cover all the issues, but it will be for us an opportunity to go into a certain number of questions and have your feedback or questions or comments on our presentation. From 12 till 1 o'clock, we need to elect a new steering committee. By mail, you have received all the candidatures to this steering committee. For all those of you who are in this room and you are voting, and not everyone is voting, it's the national representatives and founding fathers of ITRA that will vote. So for the voting members, there will be 3 groups of candidates. There will be the founding fathers, founding mothers, 2 posts, the organizing group, 17 posts, 22 candidates, and the top-level athletes, 1 post amongst 5 candidates. All the people that will take part in the vote today will be voting for the 3 groups. It's not because you're an organizer that you wouldn't vote for a top-level athlete or a founding member. So there will be 3 voting slips, and this is the case for people outside. You will be voting on your computer. So for all those of you who are not in Paris, you will be voting on your computer, on the internet address, username, password, which you have received. In this room, we have 4 computers on which you can also vote. I do hope you have all recovered your login and password if you wish to vote. And now you've got this login and password. You got it 2 or 3 years ago by the internet. So far for our meeting till 1 p.m., after which we shall break up for lunch. 1 till 2, and then there will be a second vote, because it is set in our statutes that there are 2 rounds. In the first round, there will be the candidates who obtained the absolute majority, i.e. 50% plus 1 vote, after which we shall publish the results in this room and also on computers. And after lunch, we shall proceed to a second round. That is amongst candidates who will remain. Either they wish to withdraw, if not, we shall vote on the list of remaining candidates. And there again, it's a simple majority that will prevail. Well, it's a complex procedure, but we shall be discussing this over and over again in the course of our assembly. Let me start my moral report by thanking all of you, for those of you who are in this room today, the founding members of ITRA, 12 people. We were 12 who came up with this idea 3 years ago. Catherine's here, José, Jean-Marc, Catherine, José, Jean-Marc, Carlos, Pierre also, who has just arrived, Pierre Salé, Arnaud also, he's with us, so not all the founding members could make it today. And we have also the organizer of Eco Trail Paris, so it will be difficult for him to join us. So we are more or less 12. I would like to also thank a group of young people who are either trainees or those who on a voluntary basis have decided to help us. Stéphanie, who's over there, she welcomed you. Chloé, handling our social networks together with Edouard, our trainee last summer, and also we have Matthias and Sabine, Guillaume also, who's fighting with a computer to make sure that English into French is also possible via the internet. Now, to start off, I would like to very quickly draw up a summary of our history. So a very short track record. I need my glasses to be able to read my text. So very briefly. Which activities in the course of these 3 last years? Now, on the 17th April 2012, not exactly 3 years ago, there was this discussion in Courmayeur on trail evolving very quickly, and we thought that we had to do something about it. 3 days later, I was in Paris. I was taking part in a meeting of the Trail Commission of the French Athletic Association. I was not alone, and we thought that it would be a good idea to take part in this association. Simon also is following us, and he said that we should not do something as organizers, but really come up with something that would pull together all the trail running players. So that's when we started thinking about this idea of what we call in French the Assises Internationales du Trail on the 3rd September 2012. We tried to do a lot to discuss a great many items: definition of trail running, values of trail running, management of top-level athletes, health policy issues, ranking. Also give the floor to the federation. So quite a lot. Well, there was also a lot of confusion, but at the same time, this was the very beginning of ITRA. January 2013, 3 months later, we met with IWU, and indeed, within this organization, which is in charge of the trail running championships, world championships, we realized that not that many people knew about trail running. Well, the European delegate, Paco Rico, who's here today, well, he was aware of trail running, but a great many people didn't really know about the trail running. So we thought we had to come up with our own association, and it would not be possible to have any impact on trail running if we didn't have an association. So we started working at it, and from January till April 2013, there were these working groups to continue the work that had started in Courmayeur. We worked on values, definition of trail running, top-level athletes, health policy, and ranking, which became the performance index. These working groups also made it possible to come up with good results, well-defined texts, reviewed text, quite an enhancement compared to the text we came up with in Courmayeur in October 2012. So the moment was ripe to create ITRA and also draft our statutes, our articles of agreement. So we based ourselves on the idea of coming closer to international federations, because we felt that international federations and national federations were important. It's an important player. It's not the one and only one, but it's an important player. So we felt that it was necessary to act from within, work with them. But of course, we didn't want to give them carte blanche. We also wanted to work things out from within. And that's why we drafted these statutes also to come closer to IWAF. Well, this made our statutes a bit complicated, and for athletes, they may seem a bit bizarre. And this was due to the fact that we wanted to come closer to the statutes comparable to that of IAAF, and in order to be recognized by IAAF. So the statutes were ready in July 2013. They were proposed in Switzerland in August 2013, merely to show the international dimension of our association. Thereafter, we came up with our internet. August 2013, we strengthened our association relations with IAAF. In fact, it didn't start that well in January, but things, as time went on, got better. And Struman was really motivated and felt that there was a true incentive in working with us. That's when IAAF started moving, up and until the decision was taken to work together. So IAU is still the institutional legitimate association, and ITRA would be the legitimate entity in the field. Now, especially organize world championships that would be of a better quality compared to the championship organized in Wales. The trail was not really a genuine running trail. 2013 was also a key year. The work tour started in 2013, and a partnership was defined between the Ultra Trail, and we would take care of the competitive aspects. Whereafter, we came up with our safety commission, October 2013. December 2013, I traveled down to Madrid, where I met Spanish organizers. Some of them are here today. Sergio, Eduardo. He's took part in this Ultra Cup organized under aegis of ITRA. And what's more, thanks to the president of IAU, a working group was organized within IAAF on trail running with a view to having IAAF recognize trail running as a true discipline. And this working group met by the end of 2013. There was this first telephone meeting, and then there was a meeting in Monaco in January 2014. And in Monaco, I submitted the definition of trail running that had been drafted by this working group spring 2013. Now, this definition was viewed by IAAF as a discrimination as compared to cross-country or mountain trails or ultra running, on the road. So IAAF said, yes, indeed, trail running is a popular discipline which develops very fast, and it's quite different. It's clearly different from other disciplines, and therefore we are in agreement with the approval of trail running as a separate discipline. The working group proposed this to the road trail running, so not as compared to courses on stadia. This was submitted to IAAF's committee that validated this discipline, so it will be officially recognized as a fully fledged discipline, and this will be done in Beijing this year in August. January 2014, we came up with a communication commission. April 2014, the ranking of competition was opened. ITRA would take care of one service, which is a service of an international association and no longer of a private competition. Carlos will certainly mention this at a further stage. May 2014, we came up with a partnership, Athletes for Transparency, AFT. We now have our show platform, Sport and Health Online. So there again, it concerns health issues. So each athlete will have his or her health space. May 2014, which is a key date, which José will describe. We started developing international relations. José had already taken contact a year ago with Argentina, Brazil, India, Austria, Denmark, Canada, United Kingdom. Speaking about Austria, Thomas is here now, so Austria is also represented here in this room. June 2014, well, we need to discuss this. We underwent our first crisis, the no ITRA, which was a Franco-French crisis, but with some repercussions in Italy. And it concerned a certain number of people who did not appreciate this transfer of responsibilities. So in Paris, we held a press conference. We gave the necessary explanations, and the results are not too bad because the crisis was settled. This crisis was also due to one or two people who had their own agenda, let us put it that way. So their intentions were not that pure. July 2014, again, speaking about courses ranking, we had a poor system, so we decided that we were going to further develop the system, and he will explain to you which decisions have been taken. September 2014, we founded the Health Commission. November 2014, we had another meeting in Monaco with IAAF to speak about the future of ITRA. This is something we shall further discuss later on. November 2014, we started an IT project to review our ranking procedures and future international calendar. So we shall now have a new space organizers space as from April 2015. 2014, December, our first inquiry. We shall not discuss the results today, but we shall be discussing it with our steering committee. As to 2015, January 2015, discussions have taken place with FFA and IAU on trail running championships in Annecy by the end of May. We tried to also seek the federations to open up this championship to as many athletes as possible. So then we focused on the preparation of this General Assembly. Now, with one highlight, 3rd of March, a meeting in Lyon with top-level athletes. Now, this was of the essence because even though we had made headway with the organizers, this was not the case with athletes. So the athletes were met on the 3rd of March in Lyon. So, in a nutshell, this is what I can tell you about the activities over this period of 3 years. Now, I shall now give the floor to Jean-Marc. Well, I know it may seem dull, but it's very important to uphold the democracy of this association. It was not that evident to put in place a budget for the first year. Our target was no deficit for the next team because our budget, and this is the balance sheet. As I said, the balance sheet from October 2013 up and until December 2014. Now, let me explain this. In fact, we were slightly blindfolded when we started. For the first quarter, 7.6% contributions. For the last quarter, we had 41% of contributions, which came in. Contributions are paid in by organizers. We have 10% of contributions from runners. As to the administrative costs, they are increasing. We need to answer mails, the ranking of competition, scoring, results. So we need to be more and more professional. And since our budget is still rather limited, what we do is call upon trainees. So trainees started working for us as from April 2014. Now, we've been very cautious, and therefore, this year, we have provisions up to 25,000 euros. So we have a surplus budget of 25,000 euros because also there was this shift in the date for the General Assembly, normally because it costs 15,000 euros, roughly. So I'm very fortunate as treasurer to be able to tell you that we have a budget surplus of 25,000 euros. As to spending, 6,000 euros to pay legal counsel. It's the legal experts that helped us in drafting the statutes to be as close or as similar as possible as IAAF. Now, as to spending, here you have some details. 13,000 euros, that's trainees. We don't have that many travel costs, and also we've tried to limit as much as possible our spending in the course of this first year. If you have questions, feel free to put them. As to next year, we've tried to draft a budget and we tried to reach a balance. Contributions, 40,000 euros, 60,000 euros. If we have the same development, we go from 45,000 up to 60,000. There will be legal spending involved because we shall have to review the statutes, and also we have a contract with Lifebride to maintain our site, and also a site development contract. Michel was speaking about a platform that will be enhanced. We do have a contract will trace the trail, trace de trail. We shall be traveling more, especially Michel, who travels more to, for instance, Monaco to attend the IWF meetings. And then there's the trainees who are remunerated. We now reach 25,000 euros, but we have spending of 60,000, but an income of 60,000. So we reach a balance here. Do you have questions? Now, be it the 2014 balance sheet or the provisional budget, would you like to raise questions? Now, either here in Paris or elsewhere. Anyone interested or raising his or her hand? No? Because you're all ITRA members. So we need to approve the budget, validate the budget for 2014. Now, for those of you who are not sitting in this room, you need to vote also. And for those of you who are elsewhere, you can click. So please raise your hand. Anybody against this budget 2014, the balance sheet 2014? Abstention? So we consider this budget has been approved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Nous allons maintenant donc aborder une deuxième partie.
Right, then we pursue with the second part now. And this is where we shall come back to a certain number of things which I have just quoted in my moral report very briefly, and I want to come into this with a little more detail. It's the Commission's report, and those who are in the Visio conference who are French-speaking and do not understand English. Apparently the technical problem we had just before has now been arranged, so you can call the number of the French conference and then you will be able to listen into the French translation if somebody speaks English. So we'll pursue in English, and we'll start with the security and medical part. Preventive and emergency medical plan. Dr. Bassett, you are in charge of the Safety and Rescue Commission. It is very important with regard to the increase of our activities, the growing of our activities, to organize those races in a secured environment. We owe this to our athletes, and we thus had contacts with the French Athletics Federation, FFA, and between 2011 and 2010, we set up the specifications for which will be in vigor for the organization of trail races with ITRA and a commission in order to draw up a manual. These are no rules, but there's sort of measures for everybody to respect the security rules. And we also worked on the preventive measures and an emergency medical plan. And all this work has been done inside the Security Commission. This work has then been approved. International doctors gave their approval to this. It has not only been prepared by French people. With regard to health further on, because health is a part of this security. Matty Hoffman made a sort of inventory with 10 people all around the world in order to have a list of the medical issues and injuries which may occur. And we have a sort of guidelines then, which will then help our sports to develop. Because when you know the problems which may occur, it's easier to prevent them. And we hope to be able to further progress in this context, as we have quite a big number of people who come to the trail running. We must offer them a safe environment. And ITRA wants to contribute also to the research with regard to those medical issues, which are quite particular with regard to trail running in comparison with other sports. On the other hand, we thought that it was very important right from the beginning, and I should like Pierre Salé to take the floor on this as well. So it was right important for us to say that how proud we are of this sport, because we want this to be a clean sport, and our health policy is thus important for all those who take part in our races. Pierre, maybe you could say a few words with regard to the Scholl platform, Sports and Health Online. Good morning, I'm Pierre Salé. Yeah, we wanted to create this Scholl platform, Sport and Health Online. We wanted to offer a space with regard to health questions, so that all around the world people would be able to learn more about medical issues on this platform, and that the medical services on the spot of those races are also well informed about the latest discoveries, etc. And we also want to be very well informed about doping tests and the TUEs, and thus we can see then if a profile is really varying a lot, if there are big differences between the normal status and the other one. We can then say if an athlete has to, might be a positive case. We have 4 races which have until now been concerned. The Mont Blanc, then the Ultramarine Ultra Trail on the Mont Blanc, and another one. And I should just like to add that with all those races, there is one which is particularly important with regard to the World Championships, because the other races are no official races. They are just prestigious races, maybe, but no officials for the World Championships. We have a special set of rules for the World Championships, which has been changed by the IAU on our request, and the international. And this health policy of ITRA really is a part of the World Championships rules for trail running now, and this is something very important. And I think that we will have to pursue this. Thank you very much. Carlos, you will talk to us now about this part which is concerning the assessment of races, and we thus have the possibility for ITRA to call upon special resources with regard to contributions, etc. But this also creates a lot of work for us, as Jean-Marc has already stressed right before. Good morning. If you like, I can speak English. It's easy for me anyway.
The other committees that we have been working in the past years, we wanted to represent in the race evaluation committee all different roles and qualifications and with different points of view. So that is the best way to find the best solution. So in this race evaluation committee, we had technical directors, course designers, ultra trailers, and race organizers. Okay, we all work in normal basis with maps, GPS systems, and we work in the whole world and all kinds of races, stakes races. So we know deeply, every one of us that we've been in the committee, how the races are organized and what the runners need. Mainly we have two objectives in the committee. One is to provide reliable information to runners and organizers. So the main option or the main solution that we find is to have the course certification system that you all know. And that consists in an analysis of the route followed by each race from the study of the GPS track. Okay, that GPS track is supplied by every organizer, and we certify that the distance and the elevation gain and loss are correct. This has two advantages mainly. Will enhance the credibility of the organizer. For example, when informing on their sites. Okay. This will enhance the credibility of the organizer. So, giving the information on site is more accurate, and also when there is any discussion that every organizer has at the end of a race with GPS that every runner is carrying with him. So having a track certified is it's more like a guarantee. And the second advantage is provide reliable information to the runner. Okay. So the runner can compare between races, and he can find out exactly what is the difference on difficulty. So if he's prepared to run a certain race or not. Okay. Asking at the beginning, some organizers, overall the early ones, for all this information was very complicated because some of them they didn't even have it. But at the end, it's been a great advantage for everyone. This is mainly the advantages for us. Also, we have been able to refine our method of calculation. We normalize the information given to the runners, and overall, and mainly, is that we increase the quality of the information given to every runner.
Sergio.
Has there come any suggestion on how to...
All question, you need the micro for the translation.
Hello? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Has there been any suggestion as to introducing the difficulty of the terrain? For example, in the Sahara?
Let me finish, and I will explain some of this now. Okay. On the last Okay. On the last year, I tried to go slower. Sorry. On the last year, more than 1,000 races have been certified by ITRA. And we are currently working, as Michelle was saying, with a website that is called Trust the Trail. We will give more information later to make it easier for the organizer to edit the race and to understand what is a good track. So he will be able to give ITRA and the runners a proper track with precise information. The second advantage of this system is to easily identify the race highlight, to the difficulties, easily identify the difficulties of every race, okay? This will increase the safety on the race because many runners will think twice before signing in a race without being able to finish the race. We have chosen to rely on objective, Sergio, we have chosen to rely on this one, 2 objective criteria, okay? Like distance, elevation gain, elevation loss, higher altitude, average altitude, or number of water stations, rather than use subjective criteria like kind of terrain, which is depending, weather or difficulty of the terrain, that is very difficult to measure, to evaluate, and this can create problems between organizers saying, okay, this race is harder than this other one. So if you have an objective criteria that you can measure, it's always the best option. Okay. We have represented these criteria with logos and graphically in our website. We think that is a good way to quickly identify the difficulty of the race. As you probably all know, the best criteria that we've been using are the ITRA points, that actually they are from 1 to 4, and basically they are calculated taking into account distance, elevation gain, elevation loss, number of water station, number of loops, and the kind of race, if it's a multi-stage or one-stage race. This criteria is all well known by everyone, runners and organizers, but in 2000, following our grown, the ITRA, we have overhauled this criteria in 2000. We've been working at the end of 2014, and we have considered that this criteria at the beginning didn't include the short distance races. So we will be changing this criteria, including all races, all trail races, which will take the points from 1 to 4 to 1 to 6, okay? And we also will include 2 new criteria. One is the mountain criteria that will allow runners to understand better the difficulty in mountain conditions of the race, and we will take into account the length and elevation gain, elevation loss of every uphill, and the average altitude of the race. And the other criteria that we will be putting in place in April is the ability to finish the race. That will use the performance index that everybody know already. And considering that, we will give a point to every race, and that will more or less identify the ability of every runner to finish the race. Okay. We will have open questions later if you have more, if you have any questions on this system.
Merci, Carlos.
Thank you, Carlos. Catherine. with regard to the capacity of finishing a race for a runner, depending on his performance index. I did not hear anything about the time or the time barrier. Do you have any information about that? Yeah, Carlos just didn't say much about it. Simply, it's easy with regard to the performance index, which we're talking about right now. It is possible for a race which is going to be 100 miles, for instance, less than 40 hours. You can then calculate what is the minimum performance index which a runner must have in order to be able to finish this race in the prescribed time lapse. So it's the finisher criterion, so that you need, for instance, a performance index of around 400 in order to be able to finish this race. And somebody who arrives at 350 will know that this is not a race for him or for her. But if his performance index is 400 or 420, got a good chance to finish. Matthias will now speak about a project which is ours with regard to the international races agenda. Yeah, the international calendar of races is on the website of ITRA, and we have all races of the organizers who are members of ITRA. There are about 1,000 certified races, and this is a special service for our members. And little by little, this will be opened up to everybody. With regard to the assessment or the evaluation of races, all those new criteria which were presented, we tried to give a clearer and easier information about the races. And we have been working on this for a while in order to simplify, as I just said, the inscription of races so that they can be evaluated. We wanted to give a clear idea of all those criteria with regard to the difficulties of a race, the new criteria with regard to mountain races, the capacities of the runners to finish or not to finish with regard to their performance indexes. So we are calculating this with regard to from the elements, from the information which you are giving us, and then we have tried to improve those results which we can offer to you, and little by little we have a new information space here, and we hope that next week this will be operational and that you then will have all the information you need about the races in comparison with the international calendar. Once this space has been opened, you can then also have access to the international ranking of the races. And we wanted to highlight this calendar in a more attractive manner. Two different websites. First of all, you can see the races with the photo and the most important information with regard to each race. And then you also have a sort of world map comparable to what Trace de Trail does on their site. So you have a real list of the different events, and little by little you can then see the tracing of the course if you want to publish this. So you have those two pieces of information, those. And if I come back to the website, the first website part, what you see here, left-hand side, you can see the different dates, the places, etc., all those different criteria of choice. And the races are also classified with regard to their degree of difficulties. And we have a ranking from 1 to 6, as we said before, so very short races, less than 40 kilometers. And with those new criteria for the mountain races, you can also try to find races which are more difficult from the technical point of view in the mountains, etc. We have been trying to take into account all these different pieces of information so that the organizers have more possibilities to give a clear information about their races, to make a real showcase of them on our website, and to offer a maximum of information for the runners. And then I should like to finish with the information that this will be open to all organizers. They can all inscribe their races in our calendar. You just have to come to ITRA. And this is free of charge. And the race evaluation service, which is for members only, for the time being, this may then also be offered to new organizers in the future. Thank you.
On va peut-être essayer de prendre une question de quelqu'un qui suit en vidéo.
One question from somebody outside this room. Indeed, the idea is to open this organizer space free of charge to all organizers, but when it comes to the calendar, it won't be the same thing. The members will be shown pictures, and for organizers that are non-members of ITRA, they will be mentioned but not highlighted as much as for the ITRA members. Can we have a question from outside? Who is asking for the floor? It's from Japan. We have a question.
Japan says race evaluation does some adjustment to world GPS data. So do you have any plan to disclose how you evaluate races with name of application, software, or web service?
T'as compris la question?
From what I understand, he's asking if we are going to be using a web application to make it easier to upload the website.
He wants to know what we use and how we do it, because the organizers, notably in Japan, think that there is an adjustment made to the raw GPS data.
Well, actually, there is always GPS data is not always precise, and it has to be adjusted. So we found a mathematical process to adjust the track and to make it more real. So actually, yes, it's like it's a further adjustment when we receive the track, and we consider that the track that we had at the end after the adjustment is more precise than the other one. And now probably with after we start working with Trust the Trail, this adjustment will be easier and online, and everybody will be able to understand more what is going on with the track. Okay, I don't know if I answered the question, or maybe you can answer him. You can ask him.
On va poursuivre. Je voudrais juste compléter la réponse.
Let us carry on. I would like to say, in addition, that GPS is a tool which is very useful to measure the tracks, but also it may add up to confusion. I have some examples when we use the GPS and we were downloading the trail on one's computer, reading the raw data given by the computer before adjustments. You can read, for instance, 8,000 meters height gain. But after having brought in the corrections, after having done this smoothing to get rid of all the shortcomings of this GPS, after all, the GPS is, from a mathematical standpoint, not that precise. So we can have the raw data for this GPS, and in fact, instead of 8,000 height gain, we'll reach 6,700. GPS is something which is used more and more widely, but there may be differences, and the true height gain is 6,700 and not 8,000.
Here or online wants more detail on this, I'm available to speak and explain exactly how GPS technology works and everything, but maybe it's not the moment now.
On va vous présenter rapidement.
Very quickly, let us speak of the ITRA performance index. This was implemented in August 2013. Now, this performance index was invented by a friend, Didier, who is also one of the founding fathers. Didier loves statistics. He's a statistics freak. And he's been working on a statistic approach, but also an empirical approach based on his experience, on systematically comparing all the races. I don't know how many hours he's been working on it. In 8 years' time, something like 100,000 hours, I would say. So he's put in place this tool, which now makes it possible to draw on a best possible performance. Well, in fact, there are two systems. First, you start from scratch and compare all the races, all the trails, 100 height gain, and Didier has improved the calculation, taking account of the height gain, the height loss. He's been adjusting all the parameters to have the most precise equivalent, also the best theoretical world performances based on the best, as I said, world performances, semi-marathon, 10 kilometers, 100 miles races or more. And pooling together all these data, Didier can now, for each runner, for each race, compare the time lapse. So what is the possible result? If a runner were one day to reach this performance, he would get 1,000. He is at 240. As we speak. But so you can compare his best performance, theoretical performance, to the actual time, and he will be given a score 250, 300 for the weakest, and the elite 850 or even 900. But then we're speaking of top athletes. So this is based on the maximum number of results, 5,500 results, 1,200,000 individual performances for 500,000 runners throughout the world. Now, this makes it possible in doing the average of the 5 best performances over the 3 last years, and also basing ourselves on statistics. Even if there were less than 5 races, we can still work out the results. We could come up with a performance index, which is the average of the different scores he got on all these races. So we can come much closer to this idea of international ranking. It's not a genuine official ranking, but it's a performance index. It gives you an idea. It's an assessment, an appraisal of each runner. Now, this is for men and women. We have a difference of 100 between male and female performances. And it also depends upon the categories which have been defined by ITRA. There are 4 main categories. There's the trail between 40 and 70, 70 and 100. So for all these categories, you have a performance index. Either for all the distances taken together or for each category. Now, let me tell you a little anecdote. Now, this is the list that you can see on our site. Kilian, one runner. Now, you've got his scores in the different races and categories. So you can see the list which enables us to come up with a performance index. Now, I wanted to tell you a story. Not very long ago, we had an interesting meeting in Lyon. We met some people, Greg Volley amongst them. He's the manager for Salomon. And Greg is one of those people who, 2 years ago, when we put in place this performance index, he was very critical. He didn't like it, and he said, well, no. He didn't really agree with this performance index idea. But 2 weeks ago in Lyon, he said to me, well, it works. It's reliable. So for me, it's the best possible example of somebody. For those of you who know Greg, he's rather straightforward, and what he says is of the essence, and spontaneously, without me asking him, he said that he was now confident. He'd been experiencing this performance index over 2 years, and he felt confident. A question with a microphone, please.
Looks like age categories are missing there.
Alors, tu veux répondre, Didier?
Well, as to the age category, it's very complicated because we do not have the birth date of all the runners. So we have, of course, data given to us by the organizers, but unfortunately, the age issue has not yet been settled. So we should motivate all organizers to also indicate the date of birth so that we can come up with statistics age-wise, but we haven't reached that result yet. Let me now give the floor to José. He's going to speak to us of what he's doing. It's a huge amount of work, i.e. development, international development. Can you hear me? Yes. It's a great pleasure to be here. I apologize, I'm going to speak English.
We're running as a sport is growing at a very fast pace. It's not new. It's something that has been happening for the last few years. And one evidence of this is, of course, the fast-growing number of participants in every trail race. Another evidence is, of course, the fast-growing number of races that we have in each country. In some countries, trail races are already a very important part of the athletics races in the country. Let me just give you the example of my own country, Portugal, where trail races are already 56% of all athletics races in Portugal. And this happened in the last 3 years. So this is quite interesting to notice. But another reflex of this fast-growing movement, it's the appearance all over the world of more or less organized movements around the sport, either being associations of runners, either being associations of race organizers, but also more formal movements like the creation of new trail running associations. And this is quite interesting because it's something that is happening and it's quite new. I'll have a word. I'll explain you briefly what's happening in this area. But for sure, the short-term recognition by IAAF of trail running as a sport will have a notorious effect, we think, on the development and regulation of the sport. But this recognition by IAAF, it may also be both, or represent both a problem and an opportunity, or at least an apparent problem. Why? Because as you all know, from that moment on, from that moment on, every IAAF national member will have the institutional and an international legitimacy to rule and regulate the sport in each country. And also, as you may be aware of, for most national athletics federations, trail running is still quite a new and unknown sport. That's why this also represents an opportunity for these movements, especially the more organized ones like the new trail running associations, to come forward and play an important role in this development and regulation of the sport. And that's why we have been in touch with these movements, trying to advise them on how to proceed, the best steps to give, and how they can do it. For sure, there are exceptions. And here in France, we have an exception, FFA, for instance, which already regulates the sport for quite a while. They deeply know the sport now. Same in Switzerland, and also in other countries like the UK or the USA, where trail running is already regulated by the national IAAF member with the help of national trail running associations. This is the kind of situation we would like to be happening in other parts of the world, but the movement is still going on. So let me show you a small shot where we can see what's happening with some of these new movements. As you can see, in some countries we have quite recent national trail running associations, like in Austria. I don't know if Thomas is here.
Yes. He's,
okay. Like in India. Hello, Thomas. Like in India, and like, for instance, the newborn Spanish Trail Run Association, la Asociación Española de Trail, de nuestro amigo Carlos, of our friend Carlos Garcia Prieto. So congratulations for the new association. Even in Portugal, we are quite recent. We set up our association 2 years ago. In most of the other countries, what we have is less organized movements. They are still organizing themselves, trying to build and to become also either national trail running associations, or at least groups of people that could work with the national IAAF members. the advice we have been given to these movements is based on two main points. As I said before, we need people from the sport, people that deeply know the sport, to be involved in this process of developing and regulating the sport. But at the same time, we are explaining to these movements that this can only be done in close collaboration with the IAAF member, with the National Athletics Federation. There's no other way to do it. And so, for us, there are two possible ideal situations. One of the ideal situations would be to have, as it happens in some countries that you've seen, to have a national trail running association working in close collaboration with the National Athletics Federation. This is what happens, for instance, in Portugal, where we are now members of the National Athletics Federation, and what we do is, of course, with the help of the National Athletics Federation, we help them to regulate the sport, but everything that has to do with the operational side of the sport, that is the competitive calendar, the criteria to select the athletes to be present at the official championships is done by ourselves. And of course, the more formal representation in institutional terms is done by the National Athletics Federation. This is one possibility. It's one thing that we'd like to see happening in other parts of the world. The other ideal possibility is if in these countries National Trail Running Association doesn't appear, at least to have a group of people from the sport that could be integrated in the National Athletics Federation in order to help them to organize the sport. So this is the kind of advice we have been given, the two major orientations we have been given to these movements. And that's basically it. Thank you very much.
Merci, José.
Thank you, José. We shall certainly come back to this because we still want to speak of international issues. So if you do have questions, please keep them in mind. We have some written questions, but there will be some time left to discuss them. So bear your questions in mind, and we shall be coming back to them shortly. Let us now continue. International relations. Let us show the relations we have with IAAF. Now let me come back and give you a track record. Now, what is our strategy? After which I shall be giving the floor to Patrick, who will speak of the future. You have certainly understood in listening to José, and I said so before in the presentation of our moral report, that it is key to recognize a federal idea. So we decided to come closer to a federation, an international federation, not as much to put, as we say in French, our association on a silver plate. But we merely wanted to demonstrate that we are a fully fledged member and that it is also legitimate to work with this fully fledged discipline. Now, why is it that federations are key? You are a great many people who remembered this accident in the Mercantour in the south of France in 2009. 3 runners died during a storm. Well, there were very bad weather conditions, and that was in 2009. In 2010, well, it is not necessarily the case in all the countries, but in France we need the authorization of the French administration when we want to organize a competition. And the French administration had more and more requirements, more ambulances, more doctors, more everything. So it became totally zany. So some organizers, me, Jean-Charles, and others, met at Les Templiers by the end of 2010, and we said to FFA, we need to do something about it. And they came up with this text on security of trails in France. This is the very basis of our security guide. Now, this is something which brought some appeasement, because the French administration said if the French official federation states that something has to be done, we need doctors here and there, we need rescue people there and there. In that case, we shall simply check that organizers have put in place security plans that are in keeping with the rules and regulations of the French Federation. In 2010, trail was really threatened to disappear in France because we were facing such administrative difficulties that would have been impossible to settle. So we really needed the support of the French Federation. Now, a federation also has a key role to play because it represents runners that are members of clubs, and clubs, it also means training. And when we speak of trail, it's a practice where we need to start thinking about training of our young athletes, training also in terms of health, which are the competition-induced health problems. So this is all part and parcel of training. And there again, the role of a federation is of the essence. Now, having recognized that federation is an important player, then we need to also clearly understand that they are not always aware of trail. Trail is a new sport. I was speaking of IAU. We met them in 2013. And apart from our South African member, all the others were more than surprised hearing about trail running. So we need to be able to also speak about the experience in the field, because we should avoid a risk of a trail as a discipline where the national or international federation would gobble up this discipline and draw up rules which would not be familiar to us. For instance, mountain biking, they were created 15 years before us. And there we could see that clearly things drifted away. And that's 15 years ago. But mountain biking, you went on vast circuits, 100 kilometers, and there was a real adventure and freedom idea. But then courses were organized on shorter tracks because they wanted to become a discipline of the Olympic Games, and also they wanted to please the mass media. 2 hours and not more, otherwise it would have been too long. And now it's really turned into a circus. And so it's up to you to decide, but all the trail runners don't want this to happen. So within the federation, we need to invest in avoiding such a slippage. Let me now speak of the international organization so that you can all understand how it works. Patrick will tell you about the future, our plans. IAAF, which is the international Athletics Federation, pooling together all the national federations. We have indicated a few federations. There are more than that. Well, it's not out of the blue because France is number one here. I'm sorry. But in this column, you can see all the members of IAAF. So you can see that all the national federations are involved. So the headquarters are in Monaco. They manage all the athletic events, competitions. Now that's on stadium, but out of stadium events, well, walking is not included. Semi-marathon, marathon, this is managed by a commission of IAAF, together with an international association pooling together the major marathons, London, Berlin, New York, or Chicago. And you can't see it here, but there are two disciplines that are recognized by IAAF, which they do not manage. That's mountain races, that's ultra running. Now, ultra running is managed worldwide by two international associations, WMRA for mountain races and IAU, ultra running. Now, in terms of the statutes of these two associations, in fact, they are sponsored. In fact, they have been entrusted with the management of that particular discipline. The members of these associations are the same members as the members of the IAAF. So for these two associations, it's the national federations that are members. You can also see skyrunning, because the question has been raised more often than not. This is also a federation. Skyrunning has no official relation with IAAF. Skyrunning has some ties with the International Mountain Federation, but skyrunning is not really a federation, even though they call themselves an international or skyrunning federation. In fact, it's national associations that have come together, Italy being the strongest association because that's where this skyrunning sport started. So that's high-altitude mountain races. And there are associations, skyrunning associations, throughout the world, but these associations, well, pull together a few people, perhaps 2 or 3 people only, and in their country, they will take care of this discipline. They will manage this discipline. But it's not, as in the case of IAAF, where we have national federations pooling together all the associations or clubs. In skyrunning associations, you may have 2 or 3 people that are highly motivated, and they've decided to create a skyrunning association. So skyrunning, therefore, is not really an international federation, even though, since they now have an international circuit, they've been able to come up with races, competitions. Runners are interested, but it seems that we all understand that skyrunning is still a private organizing, such as the Ultra Trail World Tour. They organize private races or circuits, but as we see it, they are not involved in a federation. Patrick will explain to you the possible follow-up. Thank you, Michel. You may ask yourselves why I'm doing this. I'm a doctor, and I decided to accompany Michel to Monaco. The question is, which will be the place of ITRA in the future? So I was in Monaco with Michel in November 2014, and I also spoke of security since I'm a doctor, because we felt we had to come up with one issue. Would it be possible to obtain the governance of trail running, and also would it be possible to obtain the sponsorship of IAAF? We had statutes, and the statutes were based on the idea of abiding by the main organizational principles of international federations, made up of national federations, but also we had in mind something else, Michel and myself. We wanted the trail runners, organizers to take part in this work. So we wanted to pursue a dual objective to obtain the sponsorship of IAAF. Together with the Secretary General, supported by Pierre Weiss aussi, who's the Secretary General of the Fédération Française d'Athlétisme, our idea was accepted. ITRA could be recognized as the organization that will obtain the sponsorship of IAAF on trail running. But as I said, we had a dual objective. It was not only a matter of being recognized, but also we wanted players, actors, organizers to be fully involved in this recognition. So our second objective could not really be reached after this meeting in Monaco. But we didn't slam the door. On the contrary, we put foot in the door, and we decided to come up with a joint venture. We were going to work together, and we decided, together with IAAF, to come up with a working group. So there would be Ultra One with that's one group, which will be in permanent interaction with ITRA 2. ITRA 2 will be made of organizers. So there will be organizers drafting, modifying the statutes, see whether it's possible to come up with a text that will give enough weight to the trailers, equipment producers, and organizers to have an impact on ITRA 1 under the aegis of IAAF. So it's a true challenge. It's a joint venture that is being proposed to us by IAAF. But still a lot remains to be done to finalize the statutes, because these statutes are not in keeping with what organizers and athletes wanted. We didn't want to follow the example of mountain biking. So we need this dual recognition, INTRA 1 and INTRA 2, which will mean a positive approach. This is how we see the further developments of ITRA. It's, of course, fundamental work we need to do. We have already started our last meeting with top athletes who are not that well represented at ITRA. They gave us their support. The organizers were present, and they've always been present. The high-level athletes have accepted this challenge, and they want to take part, and they have clearly stated this at our Lyon meeting. So actors, organizers, and future national federations will infiltrate, so to speak, national federations. We need to be strong within IAAF because we represent what's happening in the field. So we've made headway. There are more athletes represented, and this will be developed further. This is one of our major projects for the future steering committee. Let me add one word. They were satisfied to note that we had not only chronometric ideas, but also we had in mind health and safety, because there were some disasters in France, and it's because of the disasters that we wanted to further develop things so they feel reassured. So there's the health issue, safety, fighting all doping issues, etc. So we're very close to results, and it will be in keeping with the wishes of the athletes. So, Michel, I think I've told you all about it.
Je voudrais m'excuser auprès de nos...
I beg your pardon if you follow the English translation. There has been a little interruption, and I hope that this was not too bad and that you could follow nevertheless. Technical aspects are sometimes a little difficult. Please bear with us. Matthias, you sent emails in order to see if there were any questions. We have received a couple of them, and we should now like to come to that part of the General Assembly where you are asking questions and where we shall try to answer them. So the written questions, they are quite interesting, even if most of them come from 2 persons only, or 3. So we'll start with those questions which have been submitted by writing, and then we shall be able to speak about these things, and you will be able to ask your questions afterwards. So first of all, with regard to finance, which is the independence of ITRA with regard to their sponsors, does ITRA receive financial support? The finance, ITRA is financed by the contributions of the organizers and the runners. We do not have any sponsors, and we are perfectly independent with regard to sponsors. Does anybody here in the room want to react to this? Catherine, well, I should like to say that we have partnerships, nevertheless. We have partners. If you remember that we have certain arrangements with service providers. Yes, I repeat, the contributions and the fees paid by the organizers and the runners are completed by the support, the financial support of certain partners, because otherwise we could never have reached the level which is ours. We could not offer such services if we did not have any partnerships. Yes, you're right. We can talk about the partnership with Athlete for Transparency. The whole development of the health space has been taken over 100% by Athletes for Transparency. And you have seen in the budget which Jean-Marc presented the yearly operational costs, about several 10,000s of euros with regard to the development of our websites, etc., has also been taken care of by Athletes for Transparency. The same thing is true for the partnerships we have thus for Live Trail, for instance, from Live Trail for our websites, etc., and the evaluation of races, UTMB. That means we did not have to start from scratch, but we have partnerships which existed already and which helped us to progress and to develop our activities without spending any money for this. Another question with regard to the environment. Labels with regard to races which have a specific environmental aspect would be welcome. I think we have to become conscious about the environmental problems. This is not always highlighted, at least not with the same energy for all races, and we have to take this into account. I think it's a duty of the organizer with regard to the athletes. This question has been asked by a Grenoble organizer here, a Frenchman, and we should like to have your answers to this. Yes, thank you. I think that all trail organizers are particularly sensitive to the environment and have a responsible attitude, and we must develop the necessary structures in order to take this into account even better. You know, with regard to the Paris Eco Trail, for instance, we really stressed this point, and we tried to have common experiences to build on. And we thought it might be a good idea to have a panel of experts in order to take care of this and develop a sort of toolbox. The minimum activities to set up with regard to the environmental question. And depending on the organizer, this could be more or less highlighted. So this is work in progress, if I dare say. And we're really working on this. We're trying to improve our offer, and we shall set up a commission in order to work on this and offer then a program for all the organizers within ITRA. Yeah, a certain number of us have been expecting this. There's a question. The Western states really invite us to take care of the environmental aspects. UTMB is also very much interested in this and insists on the creation of a commission, and we shall certainly do this very, very soon, and then call upon all the organizers who are interested in this in order to give their support and work with us in the commission. Right, I should like to add a little remark. At the end there in France, there's the CAP 21, and this is a big project with regard to this co-responsible approach. 2 ITRA members have been chosen by the French government as models with regard to the co-responsibility. It's the Paris Trail and the Trail of the Mont Blanc Mountain. So we can then also have the support of the government, and they may be able to help us save some time and make fast of progress with regard to the setting up of such a commission. Michel, I should not. Oops.
Very good idea to develop the commission and to find a document at the end, because in Spain we are starting to have problems with races organized in national parks, and they are starting to limit the number of runners in certain areas. So having some kind of environmental document that can help organizers, I think, is a very good idea.
Fort de l'expérience de Paris, je peux vous expliquer.
Yeah, with regard to the Paris experience, I can assure you that this approach, in common with the public authorities, has been the only possibility to put upon 10,000 people into this race. Otherwise, this would not have been possible. And it would really be a good thing to set up such a commission. We do not have to reinvent the wheel, but many people could have a better situation, a better chance to work in such a way. So this is a big plan for the new steering committee. Right. We shall also ask money from De Clever, if this has been well understood. So a useful service for the organizers would be a guidebook with information on how to deal with incidents or problems. And it would be good to know how we can word the rules and regulations in such a way that the organizers are protected as well. This is rather a suggestion. Yeah, well, the Kever takes part in our organizations without being paid for this. And in order to react to this remark with regard to a legal advice or legal guidebook, yeah, we are thinking this over, how we can have a certain format for our rules and our documents that they can be accepted on an international level. But you will see that it is not easy to do this because we have so many different nationalities here in ITRA. And I'm fully aware of this problem, but we are trying to find an international lawyer's office in order to prepare this important project, taking into account the specificities of all countries worldwide, and to melt this all together in a most homogeneous answer. That is at least what we're trying to do. So we're thinking about it, and if you have any suggestions or recommendations with regard to a legal advisor, maybe even a trailer who is a legal advisor, then we would be your advice would be most welcome. There are nothing but lawyers in the room, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, please.
My name is Krzysztof. I'm from Poland. I wanted to add to something about healthy instructions. I don't think actually it's possible to do some any legal rules for all of us, because the legal systems are so different. For example, in Poland, if you have less than 1,000 people, you are not demanded by the law to have any doctors, rescuers, or something. So I don't think legal issue is important here. I think we should explore something like good practice sharing. So maybe you can manage to take all information from another countries, maybe some interesting situation about healthy accidents, and I think we should prepare instruction, but not regulation as legal form.
Donc, juste pour répondre, la remarque est juste. L'aspect. La remarque est.
This remark is very justified. The legal aspects are really so different that it is difficult to get everything together. But on the other hand, we must see the problems which may occur on the spot, on the field, and then react and see what we can do. We have already prepared a security guidebook, which gives a very good basis to protect the organizer and the trailer as well. And the second part, and I'm very grateful to Marty Hoffman once more and the Western State with Craig, that they have set up a working group who prepared the foundations of all this. Once the problems have been identified, the organizers, it's much easier for the organizers then to set up their organization and their services, etc. And then taking into account the huge number of international trailers and the great number of races, we need a legal backbone and an organizational backbone, and we probably have to work very thoroughly on this with lawyers. And anyway, it is necessary to do this in order to settle our sports within athletics, because all other sports do have such a handbook. I spoke with the IAAF, and they said that they will help us, they will listen to us, and we will then see which are the special injuries and instructions for the races, etc. But this is something which we have to do. I should like to say a few words with regard to the security guide, which is ready now and which will be put online it is ready now and will be put online in the following days.
Yes, I would like to add, just to continue the translation from okay. It's a completely opposite situation in Croatia. For each and every outdoor event, you have to contact the Alpine Mountain Service, and they're doing the estimation of how many people do they send to the field. So it's going to be a really complex process. Thanks.
Yes, I understand.
Merci. On va passer à la question suivante. À quand une prise en compte des...
Next question. The different levels of difficulty for the races of when will they be considered in the ITRA points? Will there be finally a sort of compensation within the collection, the evaluation of all this, and the Gaussian curb? Could this the situation of the runner on the Gaussian curb within the statistics, could this be taken into consideration? Well, Carlos spoke about the assessment of races, of the courses, and he spoke about a new objective criterion with regard to mountain running. I know that Killian has been working with a group on the subjective criteria. This was very interesting. And this ranking on these indexes are very close to the indexes for mountain climbing. It is very important that people go and make an evaluation with regard to the same criteria so that we can compare things. There are thousands of races which have been, or race courses which have been assessed by ITRA, but we cannot really compare them. For certain races, we should certainly set up this sort of ranking. But Carlos said that for the mountain running, people consider more the really objective criteria. It will be an evaluation of the difficulty to mount or to descend, to go up for a long time, etc. But that does not necessarily give any information about the technicity of the race. But we are coming close to a solution in reverse engineering, that is with regard to the difficulty of a race once it has been really assessed. So with regard to the system I explained, it should then be possible to add a positive or a negative coefficient, so that we have an equilibrated picture of the race with regard to others, that it really becomes comparable. Once we have all the races in our computer, and then we can compare also with regard to the remarks made by the runners, and then we could sort of calculate a quota for each of those races, a mark, if you like. And if we can put a positive coefficient and say maybe this race was a little longer than we thought, that it was also a little more technical, and if somebody is running a race much quicker than we thought, than we evaluated before, then we can sort of balance the information. We need the information from the organizer, but also from the participants, in order to have then the objective information about the technical difficulties. Maybe it's still a bit of science fiction for the time being, but we're working on it, and we'll get there one day. Then the performance index. It might be quite useful to have the list of the participants of a race and to give an automatic quota, an ITRA quota, with regard to the animation of races, security, the level of participants for the time being. You have to do this individually for every participant, and that could certainly be improved. Yeah, this is something which is already existing. And the live trail system with regard to timekeeping exists already. Live trail races and the marks of every runner, the ranking rather. The organizer will then send us the list of all those who have been inscribed for a race, and then we can compare this with the ranking of all runners. And I think once we have finished this, will be most useful for everybody.
Ça permet de coter la course.
Une question sur les assurances. Le rôle de l'ITRA pourrait également être d'identifier les prestataires dans certains domaines, assurance par exemple, qui ont des réelles compétences pour notre sport, et de travailler avec ces prestataires pour la création de produits sur mesure pour notre discipline, afin d'éviter de payer des produits inadaptés, souvent très chers. On rejoint un petit peu la question sur le juridique tout à l'heure, et du coup je pense que je vais te redonner la parole, Patrick, là-dessus.
Donc, question effectivement qui rejoint un peu l'aspect juridique. En France, on a réussi, au travers de l'expérience qu'on a, d'avoir une solution par rapport aux frais de recherche.
I forgot to put the microphone on. I beg your pardon. So the question with regard to insurances, it might be a good thing for ITRA to find service providers who really know our job and who know our needs. And we could then specify the real risks and needs which must be evaluated. And we could make a sort of call for offers. So once we know the specifications with regard to the risk analysis, we could then also call for a comparison with regard to different insurance offers. We just have to spend enough time on the risk analysis with regard to the different places in the world where these races are organized and with their specifications. It's a huge work, but it can be done by ITRA. And a little remark, even if this question comes from a French organizer, we must say that we have an excellent insurance in France, which is offered by the French Athletics Federation, which is free of charge for the clubs who belong to the FFA. This is one of the most important services which the federations can offer to us. So the organizers are well covered in France. But we will probably have to work with the French Federation with regard to the individual accident insurances. There are still some risks which are not properly covered, but the national federations can be most helpful for this, and the French Federation is offering excellent services. Another question with regard to international relations, which is the situation or the position of ITRA with regard to the national athletics federations, especially as far as Switzerland is concerned. The question is asked by a Swiss elite athlete. Swiss Athletics is the Swiss Athletics Federation. Does ITRA receive information about the national championships? Since 2013, the trail running is part of the Swiss Federation in France as well, but is this the case with the other countries? This is a question for you, José.
So we are aware of the various championships. Why we don't have yet formal contacts with the national athletics federations. It's because, one, we are still waiting for the official recognition of the sport by IAAF. And the second reason why we don't have yet formal contacts with the national athletics federations is because we still have to adapt our statutes in order to be able to welcome these federations as our members. So this is a job we still have to do. Okay.
Question de relation avec une fédération nationale.
As to the national federations, are they going to standardize the distances, short trail, that is 40 up to 60 kilometers, with a positive or a height gain? And then we have between 80 and 100 kilometers with another value for this height gain.
The recognition from IAAF, this will have to be a goal. The homogenization of the official, at least for official championships, the homogenization of distances and criteria. So as soon as we have that recognition, of course, this will be a reality. If you want to add anything.
Yes, I want to add something. On a, dans le cadre...
I forgot to, I skipped one paragraph. Will be recognized next August by IAAF. And when we went to see them in Monaco last November, it was asked to draft an article that will be embodied in the official documents containing all the IAAF rules concerning trail running. There's another article defining mountain races and another article yet on ultra running. So we are redefining ultra trail, and also we have brought in some corrections after having discussed this with a great many athletes. We've been discussing this with François Delph, for instance, amongst others, to bring in some adjustment, avoid these repetitive loop tracks. We don't want to fall in the trap of what happened to mountain biking. And also self-sufficiency, we mean real self-sufficiency and not something which is desirable. No, we wanted to clarify this even further. So we wanted this to be clearly understood. We wanted to have a clear understanding of the differences with, for instance, mountain trail running. In this text, we did avoid speaking of categories or distances because we clearly feel that all this requires long work. So before defining other elements such as distances and so forth and so on, that will be also for the steering committee, even perhaps a new commission to work on the classification and on the basis of distances. Now, this is yet an open-ended project.
For Trace Trail, you showed us categories for the races, like small, medium, extra large. So what is the relationship between them and the distances that you mentioned now, which requires more work?
On avait fait un premier travail dans le groupe de travail en début de...
Well, beginning 2013, we worked on the definition of trail running, and we came up with 4 categories. So we have below 40, small, medium, and large. But we think that work has not yet been finalized. It hasn't been included in the text for IAAF because we want to work at it together, and we want to really finalize the text so that it corresponds to what we all want.
Yes, that answered my question, but maybe if the definition of distance is not fully clarified yet, maybe you shouldn't expose that on the website to like the runners, because that may lead to some confusion.
Oui, il y a une question de clarification.
Well, as we speak, we can also ask all ITRA members on how they see the present definition, so that all ITRA members can take part in this think tank. But we didn't want to enshrine in an official document something that's going to become an absolute rule, so we didn't really want to stick out our necks. Another national federation. Can ITRA or will ITRA support trail promotion for member states?
But I'm not sure about the question. if he refers to financial aid, it will probably be difficult. But of course, it's part of our goals to promote trail all over the world. So.
Catherine?
Trail running will be recognized by the International Federation. So wouldn't there be a possibility for athletes to have a true status, a top-level athlete, which will also mean financial support on the part of the states? As for championships, world championships, or national championships, where it would become possible for administrations or national authorities to support these competitions. So this is perhaps a partial answer to this question.
Doing that in Portugal, so we are not waiting for IAAF, but for sure it's an important issue.
Mais effectivement, c'est une question importante.
Yes, indeed, it's an important question. Speaking of France, there are top athletes lists, and trail runners are not as yet recognized on this list by the French Sports Ministry. So, there again, your question was also an answer, in fact. We shall have to think about it along those lines. Ultra Trade World Tour. Now, what's the future? Will it develop further in terms of number of competitions, or are there limits? Or have limits been fixed? Well, this is not relevant today. This is an intra-national or General Assembly. It's not an ultra-trade General Assembly. We shall perhaps come back to it if you so wish, but let us focus on our elections. And then a question on sky running. What's the position of ITRA on sky running? Which are the relations between these two entities? Are they going to work together in the future in terms of programming, but also with view to make mountain competitions clearer? In some cases, the differences are not that clear, at least for the public at large. A clarification of the situation or even a communication would make it possible for viewers to see more clearly into it and have more understanding for those disciplines. I have already introduced sky running. Now, sky running is a private organizer, as we see it, as Ultra Trail World Tour, but is also a private organizer. Well, of course, it's high quality, and the setting of dates is an important subject matter. It's difficult for athletes to do all the competitions, but there are trade-offs. Sky running, it's slightly different from World Trail Tour. Some are short, some other are longer distances. It's difficult for some athletes to take part in an international competition and at the same time national competitions or races, but which are important in terms of qualifying them to international races. So we need to better organize ourselves and perhaps make some selection rules more flexible for national federations so that sky running or ultra trail were to be recognized as a possibility to qualify for world championships. So there again, a lot of work remains to be done. And then there's another question from Jules Henry. I'd like to quote the Mont Blanc Marathon. This is a sky running event, and ITRA's safety and health policy will be applied. And ITRA takes part differently. And of course, we need to further discuss this with national and international federations, but also we need to further discuss this with organizers of international circuits and try and find the best possible solutions. Now, let me add one word. ITRA will have to also think about all private races, because I've been discussing this with athletes. Calendars are difficult to manage, and as to major races an athlete can take part in, well, this is limited. I mean, in terms of the physical possibilities of an athlete cannot do everything. So we need a positive synergy to be discussed, especially with sky running and ultra trail world tour, because we need to there again homogenize international events, because after all we need to think about the athlete's health. There's another tool in the hands of ITRA. It's the performance index, which allows for the verification per country of the performance levels of athletes, even though they haven't taken part in the same races, but still they can be assessed per country. So we can also ask ourselves whether the performance index cannot become at least part of the selection process. Can you put trail endurance mag on trail running? Well, this is not really relevant either. Patrick, unless you wanted to say something? Well, Trail Endurance magazine, well, that's a different piece of cake. This is a General Assembly of ITRA. So I agree with you, Michel. Questions from outside? Daniel Perez, Uruguay, about ITRA for the United States of America. ITRA's, well, it's North and South America, in fact.
We have been in USA, namely with the American Trail Running Association. In fact, we had a video conference, me and Michel, last week, because, of course, the USA have their own specificities, things that we in Europe are not used to have in our own races, like the paces, the mules. Michel was speaking a while ago about the notion of self-sufficiency or semi-autonomy. And so, of course, for them, this is a concern, because Michel also spoke about the Article 252, the definition of trail running. And, of course, we are at the same time trying to keep the original values of the sport and at the same time trying to achieve a close, a very strong differentiation from other sports like mountain running. That's why we have there in the definition the notion of semi or total autonomy. That's why we have there the notion of discovering a region, discovering a country, and that's why we have there are other issues like no limitation on distances or on type of terrain. In what concerns the USA, the major problems for them are concerned with these issues that I was referring to, namely the fact that in the USA, for instance, they have a lot of races with a loop system. Okay, you can have a trail race of 50K by having a 5 times loop on a 10K distance. For them, these things are important because if our definition is going ahead with the IAAF, this may mean that a few races in the US could be excluded from the trail running definition that we are trying to implement. And that's why we have been in close contact with them, and of course we will try to incorporate at least a few of the issues they talked with us in order to also to welcome most of the USA trail races.
Il y en a d'autres sur la vision.
Ian Madison, I'm the U.S. runners representative to ITRA, and I'd just like to add a couple of comments to those remarks. One of the reasons why there are a lot of these loop courses in the U.S. is because we don't have the tradition of open access to the countryside. So in France, you have these wonderful systems of trails, and you can go for thousands of miles with the right to be present on that land. It's the same in the UK. There's a national network of trails that are defended by public law. In the US, you stray into private land and you are face to face with an angry landowner with a gun.
Exactly, and that's why...
So safety is an issue that involves not only the terrain, the weather conditions, the wild animals, but also the humans. One other short point is the tradition in the US of allowing runners to accompany athletes during part of the race, the so-called pacers. In many races, these are now renamed safety runners. And the idea is indeed that this, toward particularly the later stages of a very demanding race, this is a safety measure itself. And I think that's a point that should be taken into account.
Yeah. Well, just to say to you that Nancy, you probably know Nancy Hobbs. So we were in a video conference with her, and no translation? Okay. So we were in a video conference with Nancy and Richard Bolt from the American Trail Running Association, and they were explaining exactly that, the problem of the land owning in United States and the issue of the safety runners. And me and Michelle, we strongly believe that there's a way to accommodate some of those specificities in the trail running definition, namely in what concerns, for instance, the loops. We can, of course, arrange a way to limit the number of loops, but at the same time allowing some races to have loops. And of course, I believe we have a way to go, but I believe it's possible to accommodate some of those specificities to reach a common and reasonable definition of trail running. So.
Bien, malheureusement le temps passe. Je pense que tout.
Well, time's passing by. We can take 2 other questions on board, and after that we shall have to proceed to voting. But all these questions clearly show that a lot of work remains to be done for the steering committee, but all members.
in terms of consistency and safety of the regulations international from the barefoot and minimalist runners. I don't know if you're aware, but in Spain they are forbidden to run by the skyrunning partner there, which is the local mountaineering federation. They are strictly forbidden. I would like to know if there is any policy under consideration.
C'est un sujet sur lequel on n'a pas encore eu le plaisir de travailler.
We haven't really worked at it. We've not had the pleasure to think about it. Hors micro. Cette question est posée hors micro. Why ITRA 1 and ITRA 2? Because good governance would make it possible to have a balanced representation before having something too big. Well, coming up with ITRA 1 and ITRA 2, we merely wanted to show that a solution had to be found that would be acceptable by IAAF. And in order for IAAF to be discussing with federations, national athletic federations, and this is an IAAF requirement, but also we need to try and find a solution with organizers, runners, trail runners, and equipment manufacturers. So that's why we had this idea of ITRA 1, ITRA 2, but with a sort of governance above. But we shouldn't take things for granted, so we'll be grateful to have your advice. So it's just a straw man, and we shall have to work at it. And in April, we will have a working group together with ITRA and IAAF. It's fortunate that ITRA should have drawn up its statutes 2 years ago as best as we could, but now we have a formidable opportunity because we're going to review this, and of course we're going to put this too far, but we are going to rethink things. There are members, there are helping us. It's not only 12 founding members that work at it, but also others. And we are fortunate to be able to review all this and try and find representation of all actors. There will be a steering committee with 17 organizers, 1 athlete. It's not the best possible solution, and ITRA 1, ITRA 2 will make it possible to reach a better balance. Yes, and then we shall really have to vote.
Thank you, Caner from Turkey. A remark for the definition of trail and the loops. Also in Turkey, we have limitations to land and authorities, and also limitations to help from volunteers. And it's quite expensive to do 100K, 100-mile races, or not possible, especially near the city. So I think if a definition of trails is not clarified with if it's either on mountain, desert, or trails of in the city, nearby city, that should be justice way to also include loops if you don't have the support on it. And a second point, and maybe a question would be, or a point of think, we have in some countries limited insurance for extreme sports, like, well, trail running is also involved, and some races, trail races around the world require insurance for the runners also. So ITRA could be working on an insurance system that maybe only the member runners could easily get qualified. And the next point, the organizers' insurance, well, you have explained it. It should be pushed as the main athletics federations do in some countries, but in Turkey they don't, and we're pushing them to have it. But the insurance for runners traveling abroad, it might be an issue because we had a runner rejected 2 years ago when applying for a visa because she had declared it she was running the UTMB, and she couldn't get the insurance, legal insurance paper. Thank you.
Ok. Alors je vous propose de ne pas répondre.
I suggest I take note of this question and not answer right away. We shall note them in our minutes because it's an excellent question to be included in our program of work. Let us now go to the third part of our General Assembly, i.e. the election of the new ITRA committee. We don't have the time to give the floor to 22 candidates. That is the organizers, plus 2 founding fathers, plus 5 athletes. So it's just a matter of time. We can't give the floor to 30 people because we don't have enough time. So we've asked each candidate to draw up a CV, which you have received by mail 2-3 days ago, I'm sorry. Well, indeed, it was a bit short time. But the general organization of this General Assembly, election at national level, CVs, steering committee. I mean, we had a lot of work, and it was difficult to do everything in 4 weeks' time. So we do apologize because you got all this very short notice. Now, this being said, why not take 15 minutes if you have some questions, specific questions on such and such candidate, after which we shall have to really proceed to the vote. I hope that all of you who are here have thought about the person whom you're going to vote for, and 12:30 we'll ask you to use one of the computers on the tables on your left hand side, but also on the table where Stephanie has a computer. So you need your login and password. This has been sent to you by mail. If this were not to be the case, we can still find a solution. In that case, you will have to discuss this with Sabine. So do you have questions concerning the candidates or technical questions on the voting process? Now, it's done on the internet for 2 reasons. One, because this is the solution, making it possible to all of you here, but also for people outside to take part in the vote. There are national representatives, and the number of votes, well, that depends on the number of organizers they represent. And a vote on the internet makes it possible, thanks to the IT system, to do automatic accountancy. Everything's secure, confidential. And in passing, I would like to ask 2 persons in this room to help us counting the votes and observe together with Sabine also the counting of the votes at 1 o'clock. And we do have an observer who will join us at 1 o'clock. Now, who wishes to help us counting the votes?
Sorry, I don't have a question. I just want to have the votes because there was some delay in translation.
Okay. Ça fera 3.
Can I pose a question to all the candidates? C'est permis?
Oui.
Je voudrais savoir
what can be done to encourage runners, not top-level runners, but us, run-of-the-mill runners, to become members of ITRA? Because there are thousands and thousands trail runners in the States and only 30 members. Well, that's no good. So I think that one of the duties for this new committee will be to increase the number of ordinary members. And this will also help in terms of contributions. Who wishes to say something? Now, let me give you an answer, because I was in the States and that's where we met. Indeed, we have a great many trail runners in Europe, but also in the United States. We need to encourage trail runners to join us. We've spoken about it at great length. We're going to make it because we need all the trail running organizers to encourage their trail runners. I mean, we're going to make it. I've discussed this with Martin and Craig, and I'm sure that we're going to make it. We need to stimulate trail runners to become members of ITRA. Asia, there have been good and positive developments, as well as in South America. So we support all this. The more ITRA can gather relevant data on competitions, they will find appropriate information on all possible events. Will it be possible for them to take part? Will they be able to finish the competitions? Now, all this should encourage trail runners in obtaining better information and feel that they want to become a member of ITRA. We also need to admit that we are a very young organization, and services haven't been around for such a long time. We are a great many nationalities, and in only 1 year's time.
Est-ce que quelqu'un souhaite encore prendre la parole? Est-ce que sur Internet, on a quelqu'un qui veut s'exprimer? Dans ce cas-là, je peux vous proposer...
Any further comments? So, in terms of our program, we need to finish our vote counting at 1 o'clock, so you need to all have the necessary time to vote. Now, if we started right away, I suppose we can finish at 1 o'clock. And then we can go to this restaurant, first floor, or a floor above this one. Apart from the tellers will have to stay. You'll stay with us till the bitter end to take part in vote counting, after which we shall have lunch. And then there will be a second round at 2 o'clock. And this second round should be rather quick, after which we can still have some discussions, and then we shall go back home, sweet home. So let us leave it at that. And may I ask you to, in turns, use a computer so you can, all the computers are already set so that you can log in and also introduce your password. But it's all very simple.
Michel. Non, c'est bon, si on peut voter directement ici sans passer par la postation.
S'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît. Chut. On va... Le dépouillement a été réalisé.
So the counting of votes has just been made.
Then we'll go for the lunch and we'll have a second vote at 2 o'clock. Donc on va vous montrer maintenant le résultat du vote qui vient d'être dépouillé. Et donc on va tous le découvrir ensemble. Vous avez pu reprendre en traduction pour les gens à l'extérieur?
Yeah, translation is ready. Of course, you may pursue in French, no problem.
Okay.
So there we are. The first vote with regard to the founding members, we had how many votes altogether? 129. 30 took part. 30 persons. 129 votes altogether. 71% of participating members, 42 persons. That is the 12 founding members and the 30 representatives of national federations who were elected during the last 15 days in different countries. So altogether 30 persons took part in the vote today. That is 129 votes altogether. And for the first vote, founding members, Jose, 123 votes. He was elected in the first round. And Pierre, 70 votes, so there will be a second round for Pierre's election. So only those who have the absolute majority are elected in the first round. So with regard to the organizers, maybe I shall not read out all the names to you, but you see absolute majority in the first round, Annick Baumann from South Africa with 89 votes on 229. Sebastian Cotte from Canada with 83 votes out of 129. Janet from Hong Kong, 83 votes as well. Me, 99 votes for me, thank you so much. Craig with 83 votes. So these 5 people have been elected in the first round, and there will be a second round now in order to elect the following 12 members, which are still missing in order to have a complete steering committee. So I leave you with this information for 2 minutes so that you can read everything.
La caméra. Question?
According to the rules, I believe that Mr. Juan Acef should be automatically, because he's the only one from South America.
That's a good question. To consider South America as a continent or South and North America as a continent. I think that usually we have 5 continents with America, South and North, Europe, Asia, Oceania, and Africa, I think. Est-ce que tout le monde a pu...
Have you all been able to read this? Right. Then we come to the last election vote with regard to the runners. Nobody has been elected straight away in the first round. We shall need a second round. The votes are well distributed. François with 47 votes. Neria 30 votes. Nathalie 37. Christian 3 and Diego 12. So there will be a second round to see who amongst François, Neria and Nathalie will be elected, probably. So if you agree, let's go and have lunch together, and at 2 o'clock we'll meet again for the second round. And I'm talking to all the candidates here who are still in competition, if I dare say, who see us, who are listening to us on the web. There, if you wish, you can also withdraw your candidature in order to favor the voting for somebody, the election of somebody else. This is a democratic procedure. So if you want to withdraw in favor of somebody else, be no longer a candidate in the second round, you must please tell us very quickly to allow us to organize the second round. And this is also the case for those who are listening in on internet. Right then, I hope you will enjoy your meal, and we'll meet again here at 2 o'clock.
I don't know if it's clear for everybody, but we have a lunch all together just upstairs. Le repas est prévu pour tout le monde et donc c'est juste à l'étage du dessus. C'est une question qu'il faut poser. Pour toi, il y a un problème.
Non, mais je ne connais pas les règlements. Je ne connais pas la règle.
Mais c'est sur les suffrages exprimés.
Normalement, c'est sur les suffrages exprimés. Dans notre démocratie,
oui.
C'est les suffrages.
Moi, je devrais être ça aussi.
Je ne sais pas, ça va changer complètement. Ça va changer complètement la donne.
Ah oui. Alors, on va regarder ça.
Beaucoup plus d'élus.
Tu peux remettre le... Remets-moi le... Remets-moi les stades de départ du document PDF. Alors, procès verbal de dépouillement. Ouais, mais on n'y voit pas grand-chose là. Ouais. Non, mais ça va. Mais c'est juste que... Alors, après, c'est... Donc on a 42 élèves, nombre de votants 30, nombre de votes exprimés 129. Donc, donc ça fait 65. 120.
Si on est par rapport à 80 est-ce qu'on prend, est-ce qu'on prend les suffrages exprimés ou on prend les gens qui ont voté? Parce que tu peux avoir les suffrages exprimés, tu peux avoir les votants.
Ah non, mais le nombre de votes exprimés, c'est 129. Et il y a 0 vote blanc. Donc, puisqu'il y a 129 suffrages exprimés, la majorité devrait être à 65.
Alors, eux, ils ont calculé sur la majorité des inscrits. C'est ça. Oui. 50% des inscrits. Par exemple, Paul Denis, qui a beaucoup fait pour acquis. Il y a Robert Chicot. David Cervera, 65. Il faut avoir 65. 64 et nous, 65. Bah, 129, c'est 65 la majorité. Il y en a qui ont plus de 65 qui sont pas élus. 66, 75, 73. 129. Le pourcentage il était fait sur les inscrits et pas sur les exprimés. Ils sont normales, c'est sur les suffrages. À moins que, je sais pas, à moins que dans les statuts, il y ait quelque chose qui marque que c'était sur les suffrages, sur les inscrits. Si, c'est bon.
Le nombre de personnes sur les 42 inscrits.
Ah non, mais c'est ça plus ça, en fait, ça fait 159 en tout. C'est ça plus ça, en fait. C'est pas 129, c'est 150. Non. Si, ça c'est nombre de votes.
Il y a 30 personnes.
Correspondance, c'est très bien. Je comprends pas le nombre de votes.
Parmi les 42 personnes, il y en a 30 qui ont voté.
Je comprends pas. Hein?
Ça, c'est juste la somme de ça.
Oui, ça d'accord. Ça, c'est facile.
Pour moi, il y a 30 personnes sur les 42 qui ont voté. Ils sont prononcés. Le poids de ces 30 personnes pèse 129.
Ouais, c'est ça. C'est bien ça.
Parce que le poids des 42, c'était plus apparemment.
Oui, parce qu'il y en a qui avaient des... La France avait 25 votes, par exemple.
Bernard,
Bernard avait 21, après il y avait d'autres...
après les Espagnols, ils en avaient 20.
Après il y a des autres Français qu'on avait 20.
Bah après, nous, c'était un truc.
Ça veut dire que chacun, au mieux, aurait pu avoir 129 voix, c'est ça?
Ouais, je sais pas comment le calcul a été fait.
Es alucinante Senegal, es súper bonito, ya verás. No, la carrera, a ver, el objetivo es hacer la promoción, la carrera, el evento, hacerlo exactamente en las mismas condiciones, porque si no hay gente, pues igual que tú, que a lo mejor no puede o le cambian los días, le cambian las fechas, le cambias algo, entonces no puede. Entonces, lo que estamos haciendo es intentar conseguir que el evento sea exactamente igual en las mismas fechas iguales, solo que en otro país.
Así. gens qui aient 50% des voix plus une et qui ne soient pas élus parce qu'ils ne sont pas dans les 17. Donc quand vous les prenez à la suite, ça risque de pas marcher.
On va compter. Alors attendez, on va compter tranquillement. C'est bon. Je voudrais juste le checker une dernière fois. Donc, Patrick Basset, 1. Nick Norman, 2. Thomas Bordiac, 3. Pico Sardera, 4. Robert Chico, 5. Sébastien Plot, 6. Fernando Pasquale après. Kiyoshi Kaburaki, 7. Janet, 8. Alan Kaliska, 9. Michel Pellissier, 10. Enrico Colini, 11. Craig Cornet, 12. C'est ça. 12. Élu du premier tour, 5.
Il y a des gens qui ont la majorité et qui ne sont pas élus. Parce qu'on dépasse le nombre.
Ok. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Bien, on a encore un petit peu de monde sur la web, sur le webinaire. Là, on va les remercier d'être restés avec nous aussi longtemps sur un ordinateur. Ça ne doit pas être très simple. Et puis donc, et puis merci à vous d'être restés aussi. On va donc publier le résultat de ce deuxième tour. Je vais le découvrir en même temps que vous. Donc, le deuxième tour. Alors, on commence par peut-être les données de vote. Là où on a le nombre de personnes qui ont voté, un petit peu plus bas. Ouais, ça doit être la page suivante. Voilà, donc on a 30 personnes également qui ont voté, représentant ce coup-ci 127 voix, une petite variation par rapport à 2 voix près par rapport au tour précédent. Et donc alors, les résultats concernant les organisateurs sont élus. Donc il y a la majorité simple du deuxième tour. Fernando González Diaz, Jie Yang, Thomas Pinas, Paco Rico et Mauricio Silla. Bravo à vous. J'ajoute que n'en demeure pas moins que je pense que le comité directeur sera, un nouveau comité directeur sera, en tout cas moi je plaiderai dans ce sens-là, attaché à travailler aussi avec l'ensemble des personnes qui sont motivées par l'ITRA. C'est une chose d'être élu et d'avoir un comité directeur officiel. Mais l'ITRA requiert de toute façon la participation de toutes les personnes qui sont motivées par cette association internationale. Et donc, il est évident qu'au travers du travail aussi des commissions, au travers du travail qu'il y a à faire dans chacun des pays, il est évident qu'il y a clairement de la place, au-delà du comité directeur officiel, il y a clairement de la place pour toutes les personnes motivées. Et donc, chez les athlètes, je vais dire la même chose, je ne connais pas le résultat, je suis en train de le découvrir en même temps que vous. Avant même, alors donc chez les athlètes, le résultat est en fait, donc c'est Nathalie Mauclair qui est élue avec 48 voix, 29 à François, 29 à Nerea, Christiane n'a pas eu de voix et Diego 6 voix. Donc c'est Nathalie Mauclair qui représentera les athlètes au sein du comité directeur de l'ITRA. Avant même cette élection, j'avais eu l'occasion, vis-à-vis d'un certain nombre d'athlètes, de leur dire aussi que, au-delà de cette élection et au-delà de la seule personne que le statut actuel autorise à faire partie du comité directeur, le plus important, bien sûr, était que l'on puisse former une commission des athlètes de haut niveau. Les choses sont bien parties depuis notre réunion au début du mois de mars, et que cette commission regroupe vraiment des athlètes. On a fait une commission qui était avec des athlètes, on était plutôt dans un monde francophone. Kylian était avec nous en visioconférence, mais Kylian parle très bien le français. Mais maintenant, il va s'agir effectivement d'élargir et de regrouper des athlètes d'autres nationalités. Et donc, ça va être Nathalie va avoir un grand travail pour rassembler autour d'elle un grand nombre d'athlètes de tous les pays pour qu'on forme une commission et que ce soit bien, l'ITRA soit bien la représentation collective de ce qu'ils souhaitent. Voilà. Aussi, je crois qu'on est au bout. Et on va pouvoir se quitter. Donc, je pense que je peux aussi officiellement clore cette première assemblée générale de l'ITRA, à moins que des questions se posent. Est-ce qu'on fait une photo de membres élus? Il n'y en a peut-être pas beaucoup. Je ne sais pas si... On peut faire une petite photo, mais c'est vrai qu'on ne sera pas super représentatif par rapport aux 20 personnes qui sont élues. Donc, mais on peut toujours. Je pense que la photo qu'on a faite tout à l'heure, à mon avis, est plus dans l'esprit. On était tous sur la photo, là. D'ailleurs, c'est mieux, sauf les deux scrutateurs. Est-ce que quelqu'un veut ajouter quelque chose? Alors, je vous remercie beaucoup.
Merci, on va dire quand même.
Au micro.
Je ne suis pas beaucoup. Je me suis personnellement laissée en retrait, mais j'ai pu observer quand même le travail qui a été fourni pour en arriver là, aujourd'hui. Et moi, j'aimerais qu'on remercie particulièrement les gens qui ont été actifs pour nous amener à rendre l'ITRA vraiment démocratique et aussi représentatif. Donc, voilà. Merci à vous.
Très bien. Merci beaucoup et à bientôt.